Hey friends, okay, so I am going to actually go ahead and record this session because I know a lot of us are unable to join due to various reasons. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and if anyone pops in during this time, great. So if you had registered for the Finding Joy webinar, it's because joy has been hard to find in this season. And I think the past 2 years have had a significant impact on our general well-being. And I think it's a conversation that we need to have because I know for myself personally, the past 2 years have been an incredible struggle. And when I was at the height of it, when I was in the deepest point of the past 2 years, joy was incredibly hard for me to find. And I'm a naturally joyous person. I'm a naturally people person. But the joy was just really non-existent. And as I had conversations with my friends, as I had FaceTimes and conversations and discussions, the one common theme that kept coming up was we were tired. But it's not the kind of tired where you can get 12 hours of sleep and then you feel better. It's the kind of tired where you get those 12 hours of sleep, but you're not refreshed. You still lack energy. You can't focus. And I think as women, it's important to know that we wear a lot of hats. We play a lot of different roles and we do them all. And so I found that when I was doing all of these things during this time, during these past 2 years, I was wearing all of the hats. I was doing all of the things, but I was never really excelling at any of them. Really, honestly, I was quite frankly sucking at all of them. I had become numb to my surroundings. I was unfazed by the latest things that I saw on the news or in the social media world. And I started to really retreat inward just because of that loss of connection and the chaos that was around me. And so I started to suppress my emotions because that's what I do best. And I think a lot of women can relate to that. But still, I put my head down and I did the work, but I was still tired. I was still lethargic. I didn't have energy. I didn't feel the way that I used to feel 2 years ago. And it was this constant state of unknowing. And it still is. But there was no joy. It was just literally existing. And when I was talking to one of my girlfriends via text, we had this conversation about how we just feel chronically tired. We feel fatigued. We feel like we're going through the motions. And I have in here a question, and I'll answer it myself. But if you could use one word to describe how you're feeling right now, what would it be? So for me, in the height of how I was feeling and at my deepest point when the joy was hardest to find, I would describe it as a void, a space of nothingness. I was coexisting. I was going through the motions and I was like a zombie, right? I was doing all of the things, but I was emotionless. Granted, yes, I was crying every other 5 minutes and I was an absolute train wreck, but the joy wasn't there. And I personally really wasn't there. And so I went to the doctor. Regardless of how you feel about medication, I am on medication just for anxiety. And I went to the doctor and I said, look, this is not working. I'm a year into this pandemic and I'm falling apart. And we had a conversation. And what he said to me was incredibly profound. He said, throughout his entire career, he has never prescribed or counseled individuals on their mental health, on depression, on anxiety, on OCD than he had in that 1 year. And I think if that doesn't tell you the impact of what we endured and what we were going through, I don't really know what would. So I decided to do a little bit of research on my own. I decided to look at the different ways of what I can do to really focus inward and kind of drown out the noise and focus on myself. And so as I was doing this research, I found an article from a doctor, and the doctor's name is Dr. Metzger. I'm sure you can find him on a quick Google, but he has a word for what we're feeling, and it's called languish. And he describes it as that in-between space of void and nothingness. Signs of languish, according to the doctor, include low motivation, difficulty concentrating, decrease in energy, lack or an increase of appetite. I can vouch for the increase of appetite. I've gained like 30 pounds. Sleep inconsistencies. You can be extremely fatigued, or you could be wide awake. And a lack of focus. And when I found this article, I felt like I was seen. I was like, oh, there's a word for how I'm feeling. This feels so much better. Just knowing that someone understands. And he says, languishing is when we're at 0 degrees, which is honestly how I felt. It's neutral. You're not negative and you're not positive. Depression is more when your temperature goes from negative numbers. That's not what I was experiencing. They weren't feelings of hopelessness. It's just a feeling of nothing. And as I went through that article and as I dove deeper into, conversations that he was having around this languishing, he said it's important to note that what you're experiencing is a natural response based on what we've all been through. And in that moment, I felt seen. I felt like for the past 2 years, we've done head down, we've done the work, whether you're a mom, whether you're a woman caring for her elderly parents, whatever it is, the roles that you're playing, the challenges that you're facing, we do them, but we do them alone. And we feel as if the emotions that we're carrying are our own, that no one else is experiencing them. And Dr. Metzger said the pandemic has brought about heightened emotions. It's created high stress levels, which is higher cortisol levels. We're in this constant state of fight or flight. And we wonder why we can't find joy. So as I continue to dig deeper, looking at joy and all of the different ways and all of the different areas where joy cannot exist because of different things. And there were a lot of things that came up. There are a lot of things whenever you Google that you'll find, but the 5 common themes that I found were these. Negative thoughts. Hello, who can relate to this? I am the perfect person for this, right? I beat myself up over everything. And sometimes it's true. Our minds are our own worst enemies. The self-talk that we tell ourselves every single day. And it was during this time that I really found myself focusing more on the negative based on what I was consuming, based on the things that I was seeing in the news and on social media. And I was finding myself really spiraling into that negative aspect. And I was growing more impatient with literally everything, with my son, with my husband. There was not a sense of peace for me. And so it's important to know that our thoughts help shape our day, but not just our day, they help shape our relationships. And those relationships start with the ones that we have with ourselves, but also those around us. And then the second one is superwoman syndrome. And if we can't all relate to this, please teach me your ways, because as women, we have this innate feeling and need to please everyone, right? It's ingrained in our DNA from the moment we're born. Women are there to help fulfill the needs of others for those around them. And we are bombarded with words like hustle and more, and it infiltrates every corner of our lives. We live by words like busy, and we wear it like a badge of honor. We pile more and more onto our plates until there's literally no space left. And as a result, we snuff out our own joy. We think simply by doing more and more that joy will be just on the other side. If we complete this task, if we do this thing, then we'll have joy. And then number 3 is mishandling of our emotions. And for me personally, this one is really tough. I'm the queen of burying my emotions deep. You can ask my husband this. But what it does is it harbors resentment. I hate talking about things. It makes me uncomfortable. And I also hate confrontation. But when we process and deal with our emotions in real time through communication, it minimizes the amount of anger and frustration and resentment that we carry. It's impossible to find peace and joy when we're harboring resentment towards someone or something, whether past or present. And then number 4, comparison. They say that comparison is a thief of joy, and it is. Tell me it is. When we focus on who appears to be living better than us, or the things that we want that we don't have, of course you're going to have those negative thoughts. But we have to retrain our brain and our frame of thinking that the grass is not always greener on the other side, right? It's green where you water it. And then the 5th one, which I think is so incredibly important, is the company you keep. How often do we go through life, whether it's a coworker or a family member or friend? We all know them. They're negative. They bring negativity. That has a lasting impression on our mood and our outlook. And when I really looked at joy versus happiness, before I get into this, I want to propose another question. And I want you to think about it and write it down. When was the last time that you truly felt joy? What were you doing? Who were you with? Where were you? Remember that moment, examine it, and really write down how you felt. Because I think it's important, and as I've studied joy, you have to understand the difference between joy versus happiness. And oftentimes, especially in our society, we confuse the difference. But joy doesn't come naturally. It takes work. Happiness, especially in our society, is manufactured. It's a temporary solution to a permanent problem. Happiness results in a burst of energy, a burst of excitement, a burst of joy, and then it's fleeting and it's gone. The satisfaction is temporary. Joy is actually conditioned. It's long-term. It's a process that takes time to cultivate. You have to create an environment in which joy can actually manifest itself. It's a state of being that results in peace and contentment. And I think so often in our society tells us, if you have this, then if you have this house, if you have this car, if you have this job, if you have this title, if you have this number in your bank account, then you will have joy. But that's not joy. That's temporary happiness. Joy is a state of being, and it's a choice that we make every single day to choose gratitude for the simplest of things above all else. And when I was doing the research, I found this quote and I thought that it was a really good one. It's not joy that makes us grateful. It's gratefulness that makes us joyful. So what can we do? How can we add joy into our life? And as I was looking at all of the common themes and all of the common topics around joy. These were the 9 that really stuck out to me. The first one, unknow everything you've known. You've got to learn to let go of people's notions of what you should and shouldn't be doing, of people's notions of what you should want, what you need, and what you love. Because people pleasing at the root of all things does not equate to joy. Opinions are going to be around regardless. We all know this. But regardless of the choices you make, it's what's most important to you and how you feel that matters. We have to let go of the beliefs that you have about yourself and the limitations you place by eliminating the words "I can't," and imagine all of the possibilities of what is. We need to shed these layers of no longer serving what equips yourself with the ability to consciously adopt the things that uplift you and expand you so that you can build a life of joy. Number 2, which I found during this time to be the most important thing of all for me, is to be mindful of what you're consuming and pay attention to what you're consuming. Does it feed you or does it deplete you? And they say, what you consume, you are what you consume. So if you surround yourself with negativity, if you ingest negativity in the news, in social media on a daily basis, it's going to begin to reside within you. So first, unfollow the people that don't inspire you. When you're looking at your social media feed, do you feel inspired? Do you feel empowered? Or do you feel depleted? Do you feel like the life is being sucked out of you? Do you feel negative after what you've just consumed? And I was looking at a study that was conducted by Jillian, and they did a research, and it was called Applied Positivity Research for participants. And what they did was they took 3 minutes of negative news and they gave it to individuals. And then they gave 3 minutes of positive news to the other individuals. And what they found was when you were exposed to 3 minutes of negative news, first thing in the morning, you have a 27% higher likelihood of having a sucky day. But the thing that shocked me the most was that bad day doesn't last 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It lasted 6 to 8 hours. So 3 minutes of negative consumption had 6 to 8 hours of impact, negative impact on how people felt during that day. So really evaluate what you're consuming, what you're listening to on the news. For me, I shut the news off. I didn't want to hear it because it was emotionally draining. It was mentally exhausting. And then from a social media standpoint, I went through and I unfollowed a lot of people, but it was for my own mental health. It was for my own well-being. Number 3, look for meaning, right? The past 2 years have been incredibly hard, but when you find meaningful slivers of hope and gratitude amidst the hard days, it helps. And for me, it was recognizing that while working at home and working remote and having to juggle taking care of my son and all of the other 50,000 other roles that we play, I was thankful for this time because that time is something that I would have never had we not been in this position. So it's looking for the silver lining, looking for slivers of gratitude where you can find them and focusing on those. It's really retraining our brains to not focus on negativity and find the positive. And at first, it's incredibly hard. And there are days where honestly, it's next to impossible for me to find something to be thankful for. But everyone can do it. You can wake up in the morning and you can be thankful for the breath that you have in your lungs. the ability to wake up and experience another day. You can wake up and be thankful for the legs that allow you to walk without even thinking. You can be thankful for the health that you have that we take for granted until we feel sick. Those are the things that will feed you and will keep you joyous. And then number 5, I think I'm on number 5. Think in fragments versus big picture, right? I think so often we get into this frame of mind where we think long term. We have these lofty goals, and we think in 5 and 10 years from now, and we think in these large increments. And then we begin to measure. We begin to wonder, why are we getting there faster? Why is she there and I'm not? And then you start to focus on the negative. You start to focus on the why and the how and the when. But really, we need to start small. Being joyful isn't anything profound. It's starting small with one thing that you can be joyful for today. Number 6, straighten the spiral. When we're upset, I am the biggest proponent of this. I spiral and I begin to focus on everything that's going wrong. Doesn't even matter if it really is. In that moment, it's all I can focus on. And I read somewhere, and I don't even remember where, but I talked about it in one of my writings. And it said, if it's not going to matter in 5 years, it's not worth more than 5 minutes of your time. And when I thought about that, and I've thought about how often do I fester, how often do I fret, how often do I let things consume me and really take over my joy. And so now I give myself 5 minutes. I cry in the shower, yell, whatever. But then I shift my focus to what I'm grateful for. Feeding your passions is number 7 or number 8. And so often, I think as women, we are told that we can't do both, right? You can't be a mother and have passions. You can't work and have a child. You can't do this and do that, right? It's one or the other. It's selfish. But it's our passions that give us purpose. Joy comes from passion, and passion fuels purpose. It allows us to understand who we are and why we're here. And I think so often in life, we go around really wondering and really pondering that idea of who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose? And so we're going to walk through an exercise here in just a moment that's really going to fuel that and show that. Number 8, shift your focus to the now. I think so often we get focused on the past or the future, right? But we can't appreciate the now if we're stuck on something that happened 6 months ago, or if we're hung up on the anticipation of the future and the unknown. Joy is neither past nor present. It's found in the now, this moment, right now. And then number 9, which I live by, is to live authentically. And I think as women, it's been ingrained to us and in us to live for others, right? To put ourselves or to put others above ourselves. But shifting our focus from living for others and what they want versus how we genuinely want to be frees us up for that space to be joyful. And it's not in a selfish way. I think so often people look at, well, living authentically, that's living selfishly. It's living selfishly for yourself. No. You're called to love yourself. You can't love others. You can't show up for others if you don't even know how to show up for yourself. And if you want to quote biblically, right? It's love your neighbor as you love yourself. You're called to love yourself, to love who you are and who you were designed and made to be. That is living authentically. So when I started to implement these things and I started to go through and really look at and do the work internally, I found that joy was much easier, right? And for me, and for you, it may be completely different, but for me, it was, I got into the word. I started to focus on doing devotionals to really start finding time for myself, whether it was exercising or reading a book or sipping a hot cup of coffee in silence and doing some meditation, whatever it was, I used those few moments to really center myself so that I could show up better for those around me every single day. But now, before we close, I want to do an exercise. So have a pen and paper handy. And I want you to write down a list of all of the people, places, things, and commitments that need you. Now, pay attention to the fact that I said need you. Now, this is going to be anything. It can be, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I am a friend, I'm a coworker, I'm a member of the PTA, I'm a churchgoer, I'm a women's Bible study host. All of those things, all of those roles, all of those people, places, and things that need you. Write that list down. And then when you're done, write down all of the people and the things that feed you. And if you're like the average woman, what you're going to find is that list of need is much greater than the list that feeds you. And that list of need is not something that you need to get rid of. It's not something that you need to take on less commitments. Maybe you do, but maybe you don't. But what you need to do is look at the list that feeds you. Are you incorporating those people who fill up your soul? Are you doing the things that light you on fire, that give you purpose and meaning in your life? Are you putting yourself in the same category and in the same line as you do everyone else? Because right now, I think so many women are walking around and we're running in the red. We're operating red, low fuel, lights been on for 4 months, sis, and you're not filling up, right? So knowing those 9 things that we can do to really help hone in and refocus our joy, you also need to focus on how you can feed and how you can fill your cup. Because as I was talking with a friend, we had a conversation and she's like, I'm pouring from an empty cup. And they always say you can't pour from an empty cup, right? But I would argue, yes, you can. The act of pouring doesn't stop. You can still pour. Nothing may be coming out. It may be bone dry. But I would argue that to pour from an empty cup takes more effort than it does if you would stop. Take 5 minutes, take 10 minutes, and fill up. and then go back to pouring, right? I'm not saying that we can't be there for others and we can't do the things that as women we often do. It's that we have to put ourselves in the same line that we put everyone else. And I know this entire time I've been looking down, but I'm the only one here. So, writing down and really looking at the things that need you and the things that feed you. That was when I really had an aha moment of holy crap, this is why I feel so bad. This is why there's no joy. I've been operating in the red and coasting on fumes and pouring from an empty cup and just going through the motions without truly stopping to take a look at myself, right? We show up better for others when we show up for ourselves. And I think so often in society that gets flagged as you're selfish. Oh, you're doing something for yourself. How dare you? No, good for you. Do more of it because we love better. We find joy better. We become who we're supposed to be when we show up authentically for ourselves, when we be the best version of ourselves. And you can't be the best version of yourself when you're not even filling your own cup. So I hope that this was insightful. I hope that this helped in some way. I have done a lot of self-reflecting, a lot of research on finding joy, on ways to continue down the path of joy. And if there's one thing that I leave you with, it's to not get frustrated. There are days when joy is really kind of the furthest thing from my mind. And I have to really, truly be intentional with my thoughts, with the things that I say to myself, and how I start my day and how I end my day. And those can really have a lasting impact. But it's being intentional every single day and choosing, even on the hard days, even on the days that suck beyond belief, in finding gratitude, little slivers of joy, right? We're not looking for happiness because happiness is temporary. We're looking for joy. So I hope you can go into next week finding joy, being joyful. And if you have any questions, if you ever want to chat, you know where to find me. Thanks, everybody.